Good afternoon and welcome to the first primary science webinar. In the webinar, I'm going to go through these various different aspects, with the first one being what is working scientifically and how does it progress through the primary school itself. Then I'm going to go on to some examples of working scientifically, the benefits of it, so why do we kind of follow that approach. Then how is science assessed at HIS, then a bit of pupil voice, then a closer look at the HIS newsletters that have been coming out since the beginning of this academic year. And finally, I will end on the priorities for science in the primary school going forward. So within primary science in the British curriculum, there is three main core kind of aims that are taught all the way through the primary school, and it progressively gets harder as we go through, which I'll then touch on later as well. So the first one is mainly about knowledge and the understanding of the different elements. So quite knowledge-based, focusing on biology, chemistry, and physics. Then we go on to, once they've got the understanding, the actual nature behind it, the processes, the methods, making it more real life, and connecting it to the world around them. And then also one of the main aims is to actually ensure that children are equipped with the knowledge and the understanding so that when they go into the wider world or further on in their education, they are equipped with all these skills for today and for the future. Okay, moving on. So what actually is working scientifically? So these strands here are present throughout the entire primary school. Obviously, they do get considerably harder from Key Stage 1 all the way up to Upper Key Stage 2, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. So we've got the different elements such as asking questions, observing and measuring, planning and setting up different types of inquiries, identifying and classifying, performing tests, gathering and recording data, reporting, presenting and communicating data/findings, and then using equipment. So how does it progress throughout our school? In Key Stage 1, the children are focusing on, and it's a lot more structured, with more support from the teachers as well. So things such as performing simple tests, observing closely, making simple measurements, using basic equipment. They can talk about what they found out and also ask simple questions. Then moving on to lower Key Stage 2, we can see that it's already getting considerably harder. They can now set up their own simple tests. They're using more complex measuring equipment, using the actual language they've learnt to talk about the findings, the conclusions, etc. And also even going on to suggesting improvements from what they have found. And then by Upper Key Stage 2, again, quite a big step. This is going to be mainly independent, where there's very little guidance from the teachers themselves, because it should have been ingrained over the earlier years, the different elements of science. So we can see I can ask different kinds of questions. I can set up FIR tests when necessary, so FIR tests, not just normal tests, and that's usually quite independent, especially going into year 6. I can decide what observations and measurements to make. So again, which ones are relevant to observe, which things aren't quite that relevant. Use relevant scientific language and also illustrations to present findings. And also we got things like FIR tests comes into play here as well, and way down here as well, recording data using different kinds of diagrams, graphs, etc. So there's quite a strong link with maths there as well. Now moving on to what it actually looks like throughout HIS. So we can see here, there's some examples from a year 1 and year 2. We can see from year 1, it's largely group work here with some teacher input as well, and it is very structured with worksheets provided, and also the children might actually just select certain words out of a bank rather than kind of creating them themselves or relying on the previous knowledge to incorporate them into the investigation. You can then see even just by year 2, there's a massive jump between these two already. The children progress at a very rapid rate. So we got a question at the beginning, the child predicts what's going to happen, even some diagrams down here, and a short conclusion just about what they found out. So in the space of just 1 year, there's a big jump between the 2 year groups. Moving on to lower Key Stage 2. Some examples here, so we can see a big difference again. This was recently, so the children will progressively get to this point. Obviously at the beginning in September, they're not going to be writing so much detail, but hopefully we're almost at the end now, near enough, the term 2 anyway. The children will have progressed much more by this point in time. So we can see we've got aim, like before, prediction, equipment now. The method is more complex. We've also got some bits down here touching on reflection as well, and then results, and finally the conclusion, which is a much more kind of dependent on what they found out and linking it again to previous knowledge and hopefully at some point real world scenarios. And then moving on into upper key stage 2, we can see again another big change. The children here much more focused on the variables. So we've got independent, dependent, controlled, then setting them up for secondary school, because these are the sort of types of languages they're going to be using in secondary school. Some things do stay the same, but we'll be in more depth. So we've got prediction here, but hypotheses, the child's changed that for a more scientific phrase. Results down there. We actually have diagrams now, very detailed diagrams with measurements and labels, and also moving on to the conclusions, where in this point in upper key stage 2, the children should be trying to say how this links to the real world, not just saying what they found out like they would do in the key stage 1, and maybe lower key stage 2 at certain points. Here, it's all about reflecting on what they've learned, how it links to the everyday, and also as well, analysing what went well, what could they improve next time, etc., and going on from there. So what actually are the benefits of working scientifically? There's a study here in the UK which was carried out across 91 primary schools not so long ago. And they found out the 2 key points here that I've highlighted were that achievement in schools is usually much higher when they follow the working scientifically approach when compared to the normal teacher at the front, knowledge-based sort of lesson. It's much more constructive and better in terms of progress when the children are actually performing investigations and experiments themselves. And also, students were also more consistently able to make links with science and its everyday uses. So the children were actually able to take in the knowledge, understand it, and also see how it was actually relevant in everyday life. Okay, now moving on to how science is assessed at HIS. There's 2 forms of assessment that we use. We have formative and summative. Within formative, that's the general assessment that's ongoing throughout the year, and it takes place within every single lesson. We use two main things from these. We have the whole class feedback booklet, we have all track, and generally a lot of the evidence from the work is inside the books, as you'd expect. Sometimes it may be on Seesaw, but we use these 2 to assess based on books or things that we see, and also through Seesaw sometimes as well. So the whole class feedback booklet is in different sections. We have successes, misconceptions, other reflections, next steps, and learning assisted notes. So the top section could be anything that's gone particularly well during the lesson, or a particular child that has done above expected, for example, or demonstrated a certain learning skill, something like that. Then we have misconceptions, which for me is the most important kind of area of the whole class feedback booklet. This is where any child that is struggling with the particular concept being taught would be identified here from the book, during the lesson, from Seesaw, etc. And then it would then be acted upon in the next step section down here. So let's say if a child didn't particularly get seed dispersal in this lesson, they weren't able to demonstrate it accurately on Seesaw, which was the lesson at the time, I would then put inside here what support they would need. It might be a one-to-one session with me outside the classroom somewhere. It could be a small group task at some point at the beginning of the lesson, or during a certain part of the week, the school week. And then hopefully after that, they would then be able to achieve and have achieved this objective. We have then other reflections. This could be again linked to the lesson or something different. It could be like handwriting, grammar, even something maths related goes inside there. And then the next steps I just mentioned, and the learning assistant notes is if the learning assistant is present in the classroom, they might recognize something as well, something they may want to act upon in the next lesson, or again, as a small intervention or a small group task at some point. We then have Alltrack, which is a main formative assessment tool that we use inside the school. Down the left-hand side, we have all of our objectives for Earth and Space in Year 5 here, that we can see. The ones that are green, the child has expected, they've achieved that objective. If they are purple, they have surpassed it. they are working above or even working significantly above, depending on how well they've done. Then we have the orange here where they're kind of just working towards it. They've not quite understood the particular concept being taught there. So that's generally how it works. As we go through the year, we're constantly changing these and updating them with particular children. For example, this child here, we can see from the overview they have one orange and three greens compared to a lot of the children who have done a bit better. This is where the data will be analysed and acted upon at a later date to try and get that child to at least expected where they should be. With working scientifically, that'd be exactly the same. We've just changed it here to working scientifically, and we have a long list of the different working scientifically objectives, down the side here. And again, we give the child a particular assessment colour based on what we have seen in that particular lesson. Then we go on to summative. This is kind of the old-fashioned form of assessment. Right at the end of a topic, at the end of a module, that's when you would do a test, for example. That's not quite how education has worked for quite a while now. We do still use it sometimes. For example, all track, once we have filled in all the different colours, we can then kind of see roughly where the child is at and make a judgment based on how well they are doing. So, for example, if the child had a lot of greens that are expected, or if they had a bit of both, we might, a bit of green, a bit of purple, so above, we might kind of say, actually, that child is actually working above. Or if the child is entirely purple, then the child is definitely going to be working above or even significantly. And it works the same way with the orange as well. Moving on to short quizzes, again, this may be used by teachers to kind of just check, knowledge check, and help plug any gaps that may be evident. And finally, the GL assessments, which we have to take part in with Dubai, along with the English and science ones, and then are kind of used to compare and contrast different schools in Dubai. All right, moving on to pupil voice. This is where I went around the school at different year groups and I asked a range of different, well, two different questions to the children. The first one being, what do you enjoy most about science? And also, how do you think that you actually learn best? So there's a little clip here to see what the children think generally around them two questions to do with science inside the school.
I enjoy science because we got to do experiments. Experiments and stuff. I enjoy most about science when I experiment, like when I make lava lamps and oxygens. I like most about the investigations when we plan them and when we do them. What I enjoy most about science is the practical activities because I learn a lot more where you have the things in front of you. For example, electricity. You have the wires and the cables, you have to find how to connect them, and then you learn a lot more like this is what a battery looks like, this is what a bulb looks like, this is how I can connect the wires. So I think I learn a lot more by practical activities.
What I enjoy most about science is when we work in groups to make videos to explain stuff.
I learn best in science once we do fun investigations. When I write down stuff. I learn best in science when I do practical activities like moving things into different categories.
I like it when we do practical investigations.
How I learn best in science is the practical activities.
I learn best in science when we do practical works.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the short video there, and you can clearly see and gather that generally the children enjoy and learn the best when they're actually doing the hands-on approach, which is the evidence backs that up as well, so that's fantastic. Just another short note, if you aren't aware, there is an actual science newsletter that goes out now, that goes out at the end of every term. It's on its third issue now. There's lots of great content inside here. End of term trip ideas with the science focus. There's app suggestions which can be used just for a bit of fun at home, or also revision, which can be very helpful. As we all know how much children love their iPads now, so it's a great way to keep them engaged, but also try and consolidate the learning at home as well. We have Standing Out Science, so that's from throughout the school, all the year groups, one particular thing from that particular term that kind of stands out as the best moment for that particular year group. We then have some interesting news ideas and news from around the world, and also then let's investigate just something to continue a bit of fun and again continue learning at home with some actual investigations that usually are using a lot of the things that are already inside the house, so household items, so it's not too strenuous. And also, when you're stuck with what to do, maybe during the half term, these can be very helpful as well. So finally, moving on to my final slide, looking at the primary science priorities inside HIS moving forward. Generally as a school, we are in a fantastic place with science. We are at the very good as graded by KHDA. We're just trying to do a few minor tweaks now to get us to that outstanding level. There is more priorities than these, but these are the main three that I think and should get us to that next and earned outstanding level. So through planning and resources, teachers are using the data to ensure that all the needs of the children are met. So that's the higher achievers, the lower achievers. We're using the data that we have on the children to try and make sure that they work and the lessons are personalised to them. And also providing appropriate support to ensure that all the children can actually achieve what's being taught as well. Also, we have questioning and challenge activities through use of augmented reality as well to provide options for children to think critically and also provide more links to real life scenarios. The children can do this, but I just think that it's something that can be improved, and I'd like to see it more regularly inside lessons. And finally, provide more opportunities for children to actually read across the curriculum in science. So it could be through my own homework, free reading text in the classroom, that the children, rather than reading the normal fiction books, they spend a bit more time reading non-fiction as well, as that is obviously of great importance as well. Talking about science in the wider world as well. Just reading, using a balance of these at home and in school is also going to improve that certain area as well. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've learned something new. And again, if you have any questions, then I'd be more than happy to answer any. Just send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.